Flat Earth Clues Part 6 Depth Perception. This is part of a series of clues that can help you get your head around both the design of the flat Earth system we live in and who has been involved in the deception to hide it from you. This clue looks into the inevitable design question below the surface, or more specifically, how thick the flat Earth design would need to be. To start, let's quickly recap the design features so far. A basic dome structure made up of advanced high-density material, thousands of miles wide, and at least 100 miles in height. The ceiling of said structure being projected upon by an ultra-high-definition system using super LED technology and a combination of 2D and 3D imaging to simulate all celestial bodies, including sun, moon, stars, and so on. This ceiling is then protected by a scaling decrease in temperature and oxygen levels to the point where human life isn't naturally sustainable above 4 miles. The lower surface of the dome structure consists of an organic layout of continents, grouped at the center, ensuring that no land bridge exists to the outer ring. This is then surrounded by hundreds of miles of salt water in order to limit sea travel. The salt oceans are then adjusted with a scaling decrease in temperature as the outer area is approached, to the point where salt water freezes, forming icebergs, further reducing sea travel. The outer ring is then elevated to a height of 10,000 feet, reducing oxygen levels, and a buffer zone of 300 miles is created. This zone is devoid of all life forms that could be used as food, further discouraging land travel. That all sounds pretty good. But we left out one thing: depth. Keeping human beings away from the ceiling is easy, because it requires higher technology. Protecting the outer ring is a little more difficult, but can be accomplished with layers of negative reinforcement. Protecting the actual common ground is a different challenge, because digging is basic. Everyone knows how to use a shovel, and most construction requires a generous amount of digging. In addition, natural resources such as coal, oil, minerals are harvested through large-scale digging operations. So it's safe to say that any human population is going to be digging a lot of holes, because it's easy and it's necessary to continue their way of life. That being said, how thick would you need to make the flat Earth model so that people didn't accidentally dig their way through? You could use the same method as the outside barrier and create a series of undesirable layers, ending in a solid barrier. But the ever-expanding increases in general population would create an unnecessary risk. If the bottom of the flat Earth was composed of, say, an unbreakable material, this would pique the digger's curiosity, and if repeated all over the world, would raise suspicions of design. While a solid barrier works at the end of a frozen wasteland where no one is venturing, or allowed, it doesn't do much if it's found in a mining quarry or someone's backyard. For that, you need something that hasn't been used up to this point: a scaling increase in temperature, all the way to an ignition flashpoint and then beyond. Now you will jump in and say, well, of course, we all know that there is molten rock below the surface. We see it in volcanoes and, well, volcanoes. Yes, you do. And we've all seen the cross-section diagram of the globe Earth, which shows ever brighter bands of molten structure and so on, which is why I included the wiki link in the description that covers the official view of the Earth's structure. And I quote, "Scientific understanding of the internal structure of the Earth is based on observations of rock in outcrop, samples brought to the surface from greater depths by volcanoes, analysis of seismic waves, measurements of gravitational and magnetic fields, and experiments with crystals at pressure and temperatures characteristic of the Earth's deep interior." In short, they have no clue on what's below them. None. In fact, the deepest holes ever drilled, which I've also linked in the description, only go down 8 miles. To repeat, no one has gone below 8 miles anywhere. And every drilling survey is the same: a scaling increase in temperature to the point where drill bits stop working. And you come back and say, but volcanoes. Yes, there are volcanoes, holes in the earth where molten rock is produced, under pressure, I might add. Certainly that can't be artificially created. No, we can melt rock right now. It's called a smelting plant. What do you think your car is made out of? Melted, reformed, and polished rock. We have the technology to do this. It all comes down to scale. Create a large set of furnaces at, say, 50 miles below the surface that can melt and pump molten rock. And you say, what would the furnaces be made out of? Oh, I don't know. How about the same dome material that can withstand nuclear weapons? So you take the molten rock, locate a few random access points on the surface, and the rest comes naturally. Volcanoes also reinforce the Earth structure model that the molten rock goes all the way to the core, which then in turn reinforces the globe model, and then we're back to where we are now. A smoldering globe flying through space at high speeds that from a design standpoint makes no sense. So how thick would the flat Earth model floor need to be? Oh, for common use, say less than 100 miles, similar to the ceiling in scale. Large heat generators placed in a pattern, a thin layer of molten rock 10 to 20 miles down, which is really just a geologic pipe system to help with the generation of terrain. And there you have it, an efficient way of discouraging all those digging humans from reaching too far, combining a physical barrier with a mental one. 8 miles down and you're going to tell me what the entire core looks like? Give me a break. So do some of your own research and ask questions. Please feel free to email me at msargent23@comcast.net or 303-494-6631. Flat Earth Clues Part 7, The Long Haul. This is part of a series of clues that can help you get your head around both the design of the flat Earth system we live in and who has been involved in the deception to hide it from you. This clue looks into a topic I only glanced at in the original guide, which is the southern hemisphere, or in the flat Earth model, the land masses closest to the outer ring. I like to give credit where credit is due, and the long haul title was given to me by a fellow flat earther who did some of the same research I did. The summary of the video is this. If you are looking to show someone how to view the flat Earth from a practical point of view, this is the example I would use. I'm going to show you how strange the world looks using just a few websites, some simple math, a couple minutes, and your brain. You don't have to write anything down, unless you want to, of course. I'll give you everything you need on screen and break down one of the examples as well. I'll also link the sites in the description for reference. First, here are some websites that help you calculate distance. The GPS on your phone already does this, and you may have an app as well, but here are some dedicated examples. Timeanddate.com, tripit.com, distancefrom2.net, worldatlas.com, freemaptools.com, and travelmath.com. If your favorite isn't listed here, like Google Maps, then use whatever is most familiar to you. Now we are going to look at two specific groups of cities. The first group is going to be from the area around Australia, including New Zealand. We'll call this Group 1. Group 1 includes Melbourne, Australia, Sydney, Australia, Perth, Australia, Auckland, New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand, and Hamilton, New Zealand. The second group is going to be some cities in South America, all in the southern hemisphere. I mention this because if you go high enough, you will run into a few cities that won't work. Group 2 includes Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Brasilia, Brazil, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Lima, Peru, and Santiago, Chile. Again, there is a link in the description with many other airports. Now, these two groups are interchangeable, as you would imagine, so you can start or end with either Group 1 or 2. The results will be the same, and just to make it interesting, I'll use a slightly different example which a fellow flat earther did the legwork on and show you that even these two groups aren't exclusive. So you take anything from Group 1 and anything from Group 2, and you get some distances, ranging from 6 to 8,000 miles roughly. That's all I want you to do here is get that part in your head, noticing that the root is bent because they have to account for the curvature of the Earth. All these directions are what you would expect, a straight shot over the South Pacific Ocean. Now, just to prove it's not an exclusive route, instead of starting in, say, Rio and landing in Auckland, I'll start what should be the opposite side, in Cape Town, South Africa, which is roughly the same distance on a globe Earth coming in at 7,300 miles. Notice on the map it's still a straight shot through the Indian Ocean and not crossing any countries, an easy route. I try to book my flight. For this example, we use Travel Math, but you can use whatever is easiest in your country, like Priceline, Expedia, Travelocity. It will make no difference because they're all tied to the same system. And this is when everything goes wrong. So the first leg, the airlines don't send me due east, but instead shoot me 4,700 miles almost due north to Dubai. Okay, maybe we're just picking up people. Seems a bit excessive, but I'll go with it. I'm probably comfortable in my seat drinking vodka tonics anyway. And from Dubai, it should be a straight shot home to Auckland, right? No. Now they send me southeast to Melbourne, a mere 7,300 miles. And then finally a third leg from Melbourne to Auckland coming in at around 1,600 miles. I'm rounding up or down to make the math easier. Regardless, the total miles for this flight is almost double what should be expected, coming in at 13,600 miles. In addition, the trip took me 37 hours. How long should it have taken? Well, in a 777, about 12. Now this is where you come in and say, well, it's probably an isolated incident, or some strange connection thing. You know how the airlines are. Oh no, my friends. We can do this all day. This roulette table is rigged, and there is no way to get a fair game. The first part of the clue is the utter lack of non-stop flights from anywhere in this hemisphere, which is why I give you multiple cities in each group. And here's the plot hole for you. Flying from international cities like Sydney, Rio, Santiago, or anywhere else close by, you can't get a single non-stop flight, no matter how much money you pay. I tried to do this for an entire night, and it was like playing an online casino game, one that I was losing most of the time. The connections kept coming in like spam windows. Start in Christchurch, go to Auckland. Start in Auckland, go to Sydney. Start in Sydney, go to Dubai, or Los Angeles, or somewhere else that makes no sense. Some of these connections took the trip over 50 hours to complete. Go ahead, try it yourself. You may find one non-stop. But even then, the strangeness doesn't end there, because the speed is wrong. For reference, I included an optimum cruising speed guide from a commercial pilots forum that lists all the international aircraft used in these routes. A 777, the current state-of-the-art flagship plane, designed for maximum fuel efficiency, has a cruising speed of 640 miles an hour. 7,400 miles comes in at around 12 hours. Try to find this route. It doesn't exist. It can't. The closest I came was a one-connection flight with a 3-hour layover. The total flight time was 20 hours. 20 take away 3 is 17, not 12. And this might work if the plane was doing, say, 430 miles an hour. But it's not. In fact, the slowest cruising speed I found was an older Airbus just around 593. But this is all just numbers, right? It is until you pull up the flat Earth map and look at the farthest 2 points, which just coincidentally are anywhere in Australia and most of South America. Or my example of Lower Africa, which you can see isn't west at all. It's a shell game, and a very good one at that. Keep people guessing with multiple connections and layovers, jumping from city to city. People just sit in their seats, trying to sleep through it. And then it hits you. Well, the pilots would know, right? They fly all day, every day. Certainly, they would have figured it out by now. Some of them would get suspicious, sure. Any decent navigator will be able to work out the speed, fuel consumption, and odd connections. But imagine what they would have to get their head around. First, they would have to ignore the world GPS system that has been leading them to their destinations without error. If you want some interesting side reading, check out the link on the history of the GPS. And I quote, developed in 1973 to overcome the limitations of previous navigation systems, integrating ideas from several predecessors, including a number of classified engineering design studies from the 1960s. Oh, and by the way, was created by the Department of Defense, the same people that closed off Antarctica. GPS went fully live in 1995. So if you were a pilot before then, you might have been able to pick up a breadcrumb trail. After that, very difficult. Plus, let's say you did figure out that something was off. Who exactly would you tell? The FAA? You would be looking around and wondering why you were the only one to see it. And then what? You make the leap of faith and see that the entire map system is wrong? Never gonna happen. You might as well just tell them that an alien spacecraft followed your plane around for 2 hours. We know what happens then. Start playing Flight Time Casino for yourself. See what interesting things you can discover. And while you're at it, show it to any pilots that you know. But don't forget to leave the words flat earth out. Because that's crazy, right? So do some of your own research and ask questions. Please feel free to email me at msargent23@comcast.net or 303-494-6631. Flat Earth Clues, Part 8, The Creative Force. This flat Earth perspective takes a look at the design from the ever-present why standpoint. And although it will review some of the dome technical features already discussed, I'll try to do it from a different angle, or more specifically, why I might build it. Someone mentioned to me recently that while the dome was a very big concept, it made the world much smaller. Kind of like what Admiral Byrd expressed in an interview all those years ago. This someone also said that it made them sad, which I understood. And while I did what I could to comfort this person, I realized that I could have done more. So this video is for the people who look upon this world with their new eyes and start drifting into a state of melancholy. To preface, this isn't jail, nor are you lab rats. And before I'm done, I hope to show you a version of why. To start, let's look at an old story, one that you may have heard involving another enclosed world, kind of like yours. I say kind of like yours because the finished design that you are sitting in right now took several revisions in just about every aspect, much like any project. You come up with ideas, you see what works and what doesn't, and you improve the process until you come up with something that, while not everyone agrees upon, satisfies the best of all criteria. One of the first dome layouts involved a race of people who were supremely driven by ambition. They didn't have a word for lazy or fear. They absorbed knowledge very quickly, incorporating physics, advanced electronics, engineering, and drove their technology with energy from the enclosed world itself. And when their technology had reached the point where the dome's structure was discovered in its entirety, there was no reaction of wonder and awe. They just looked up and squinted at the sky. Eventually, those squints turned into glares. Oh, they had religion to be sure, and it was tied to their daily lives, but to them, this wasn't religion. It was a challenge. Almost like they weren't that impressed. Hard to fathom, right? Seeing that your world had borders, but instead of being afraid, shaking your fist at the sky with arrogance. But that's what they did. So much confidence and might that when they found out where they really were, a new priority was created. At first, they dedicated broadcast channels to calling the dome builders out, demanding answers, and ran them day and night. At the end of each cycle, the words kept repeating, "We know." But arrogance ebbs at patience, and their demands were met with silence, which was taken as blatant dismissal. This fueled their ambition even more. The people withdrew all their efforts from breaching the outer barrier and formed a new plan. If the creators were not going to submit, then they would build a bridge and meet them at the gates. So a building was designed. But to call it a building was to call the pyramids a sand castle. It was the greatest structure ever conceived, at least to them. It was to be over 30 miles wide and hundreds of miles high, enough to reach the dome ceiling itself, where they would meet the builders face to face. They abandoned nature completely and pushed aside ecologic systems to accomplish their goal. They cannibalized entire mountain ranges, which they used to admire and love, to acquire the raw material for the awesome structure. The work crews built with flawless precision, and it was obvious that it was going to succeed. A bridge to the edge of the sky itself. The work would only pause long enough for the mighty armies below to look up and yell, "We come for you," so loudly that on a clear day you could actually feel the dome shake. And the creators, faced with their first great challenge, decided to start again. And the people were changed, their language fragmented so that the builders couldn't continue. The tower was dismantled, their technology removed and forgotten, and the people scattered. A new group was introduced to the dome, divided in every way imaginable, so that unity was next to impossible, and everything slowed down. Languages evolved and devolved into other dialects, and the languages produced text, which produced different forms of culture, and some amazing things began to happen, the most important of which was the arts. The dome builders saw the artistic pool develop into several distinct forms. Everything drawn in any medium on a flat surface. Everything molded that took on a three-dimensional shape. Everything that produced music. All things that make up the human form and motion. And all the written works. Pictures, sculptures, music, dance, literature, the arts. Driven by passion, it is the very essence of what is good in humanity. Once this was recognized, all dome methods put in place were to cultivate and enhance this process. Land masses were adjusted with geology and temperature to support every kind of terrain, with mountains, rivers, oceans, plains, forests, jungles, deserts, all of it stunning, all of it stimulating the human mind, nourishing it. And the modifications continued, with seemingly endless shades of weather. The sky was overhauled, a moon added, and layers upon layers upon layers of stars, so that one day, when the people were able to see further than their own eyes, there would still be something new to see. And the arts flourished, but there was a cost. The languages and division of cultures had put the population at odds, and wars were raging at regular intervals. The dome builders debated if the price was too high. Plans were drawn up to make more changes, until they noticed that the arts thrived even through the worst of conflicts, producing grace and beauty despite their burning world. It was wonderful and terrible at the same time, and the debate outside the barrier continued to intensify until a majority spoke out and said, "This world is a creative force, and we must see what it leads to. The barrier must be hidden at all costs." So the globe model was put into the population, and both science and religion adapted to it. The arts grabbed onto it like a new drug, the creative minds of the world exploding with new concepts. Their universe was now infinite, and the rules changed. Science then led to science fiction, which opened up everything else. Books, pictures, sculptures, dance, and music, all reaching deep into space, decade after decade of wonderful possibilities, rising above the ashes that were at their feet. And it's not just the artists, it's everyone. You affect others, who affect others, who inspire others, who build it, paint it, sculpt it, sing it, who then put it up on a pedestal and hold it under the light and say, "This is a piece of who we are." And for every one of them, there are hundreds of others who, for whatever reason, were unable to express the songs and images and stories that are in their heads. Imagination is far more important than knowledge because it is limitless. It is your shield, your sword against the cruelty of destructive forces. There are those right now who live in chaos, whose life is surrounded by a swirling nightmare from which they think they'll never escape. These are the true warriors of the world, and they are far braver than me. I am humbled by those who suffer the most. Know that mountains were built for you. Oceans were built for you. All of this was built for you, your struggles and your trials by fire. It may be today, it may be tomorrow, but one day the curtain will close and this stage will be struck. And when the dust settles, no matter where you are right now, you'll see the big picture and have new eyes, and you will be shown what wonder really is. And as you leave this most magnificent of theaters, heading towards the next, my hope is that you'll pause, look back at the stage and say, I was actually in it, right there in the thick of things. And it was a sight to see. Because it really is a hell of a ride. Imagine what the next one will be like.